Welcome to Genuine Humans, exploring the stories behind the great marketing leaders of our time and hearing how their journeys have influenced the brands they've built. Brought to you by The Social Element, here are our hosts, Tamara Littleton, CEO and founder, and Wendy Christie, Chief People Officer.
A big warm welcome to our listeners from me, Tamara Littleton, and my co-host Wendy. Wendy, how's your week been?
Hi, Tamara. It's been really good, thank you. As we record this, we're in the middle of the Euros, and my other half and I have become armchair experts, despite only watching football once every 2 years.
I think that's the best way. You see, I used to play football. I used to play for Hackney Women's Football Club, but I was the only one who didn't actually support a team. But I feel like it is my right that every year I can become an expert watching the England games. But yeah, so, we are delighted to be joined today by Craig Inglis, who has worked for Thomson Holidays, Virgin Rail, and more recently John Lewis. And he is also the non-executive global chair for the Marketing Society. Craig, a big warm welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. How are you?
Really good, thank you. It's lovely to have you here. And do you know what? We're going to just kick off straight away because, Craig, I love hearing about people's journey into marketing and maybe finding out about the twists and turns along the way. So would you mind just sharing your story, and you can go back as far as you want?
Oh, that's dangerous. Going back. Well, look, as you might be able to tell from the accent, I grew up in Scotland. I grew up in a little mining town on the east coast of Scotland called Leven, not far from St Andrews in Edinburgh. And I was I am one of three boys. I was the middle one. So I've sort of carried a chip around on my shoulder for many, many years as a consequence. Yeah, I mean, I think childhood was basically great fun, but we didn't have much. I grew up in a council estate, and life was pretty tough in many ways as I look back, but it didn't feel like that, if that makes sense. And when I went to school, no one really went on to uni at school. It was not the done thing. People tended to go on to become welders and fitters and things like that because it was well paid. I think it was about 300 quid a week, which seemed like millions at the time. But so I was one of just a few people who actually went on to uni. It was three of us. So slightly against the odds. And so I went on to uni from school to study business and marketing. And so from quite early on, I had an interest in marketing. I'm not sure I knew that it was marketing mind, but I was definitely interested in consumers and business and the sort of the various dynamics around that. And I did really well at uni. I managed to get myself a first. I still don't quite know how I did that, but through just sheer hard work and determination, I think. And then I left there in 1992, which I've just realised is 30 years ago next year. Oh, my word. I left with a backpack. I got on the train at Edinburgh and ended up in London and work for Thomson Holidays, as you said, and joined the graduate training scheme for marketing, which was fantastic. It was my apprenticeship really in marketing, and the friends I made there are still some of my closest friends today, which I think speaks volumes. And but I loved it. I was enticed into the role by a brochure in the careers room at uni. We had actual careers room with actual brochures back in those days, and on the front was a deserted beach with a palm tree, and I thought, ooh, that looks like work. I mean, that's the kind of work that I want. And also, I love the intrigue of the travel industry, but I was also just really taken with the idea that Thomson was all about building people's dreams, that was their purpose, which might seem a bit grandiose for a business that's sold package holidays, but actually their customers, they saved up all year for the 2 weeks in the sun, and it was great to be part of the team that created those dreams. So I loved that. I learned loads about pricing and product and all those sorts of things. So I did that for about 4 years or so, and then I left and went traveling around the world for a year because I realized that despite being in Mallorca 27 times in 4 years and the Algarve 15 times, it wasn't quite quenching my thirst for travel. So I went off traveling for a year and then came back and saw Richard Branson on the telly, on the news, hanging out at the front of a train and declaring that he was going to revolutionise the UK's railways by bringing sort of Virgin Atlantic service to trains. And I was completely seduced again by the sort of vision and the belief that he had. And so I joined Virgin Trains as a product manager, and it was really tough, way tougher than Richard or any of us ever expected, I think, because in effect we were taking what was, you know, part of the civil service and trying to turn it into a sort of entrepreneurial virgin business. And it was the first virgin business that wasn't a startup. And so it was, you know, there was things that we learned that just had never been learned before. So it was very, very tough for the first few years, but we got there and we did, I think, revolutionize trains in this country. And sadly, Virgin Trains no longer exists. But whilst it was there, I think it made a massive difference to this country. So I loved every moment of that. And it was the making of me. I left there as sales and marketing director. And then in 2008, I left there, joined John Lewis. Again, I was sort of taken by the purpose, I think. John Lewis is all about having a better way of doing business. It's owned and run by its partners, and that meant something to me. And that side, I had a sense as a marketeer that it was a bit of a sleeping giant of a brand. It felt like there was huge opportunity. They hadn't really embraced marketing up until that point, and so I really felt I could make a difference. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I joined there and as head of brand communications, doing the advertising and so on. And again, the sort of first year or two was quite bumpy, and then I became marketing director, took on a sort of bigger remit, and started the sort of transformation around the brand that has become well known. And in 2015, I joined the main board as customer director and took on responsibility really for every part of the customer experience. And the team grew from 30 to 600. So it was a big old job, covered all the digital channels and changes in shops and all those kind of things. So yeah, so I did that for 5 years or so, left there last year. There's been a whole sea of changes at John Lewis in the last year or so. And I am now looking for a new job. So if anybody's listening in who thinks, you know, he sounds all right, he's not made a complete idiot of himself, then I'm sure you can get my details. But and as well as that, I'm also non-exec chair of the Marketing Society, which, as you said, which I've been doing for about 3 years, and is a great privilege, and is really all about ensuring that marketers in this country and across our 6 hubs around the world can be their best possible themselves. And we stand up for the marketing industry.
You talk about the sort of sense of purpose with the brands that you've kind of connected with. Do you think that it was that's what pulled you into the different brands? I mean, you sort of said obviously you was seduced by wanting to sell holidays and you know, selling essentially a dream. But was it also, you know, connecting to Richard Branson and to John Lewis, which is a very sort of well-loved brand? Do you think it was kind of purpose first?
Yes, I think it was. And I'm not sure if I would have been able to articulate that to you at the time. Intuitively, I think I might have known. But looking back, you know, it's very, very clear to me that in each case, it was the purpose, the belief, the thing that drove the whole business, that drew me in. And actually, and also that kept me there. I look at my time at Virgin and then again at John Lewis, lots of the cohort that I joined with sort of a group of maybe, you know, 10 people. Mm. Many of them had gone after a year or two, and I stayed the course. And I've only worked for 3 brands really, which is, you know, is nothing for most marketeers. Most marketeers are in their jobs a couple of years, you know. So, and I stayed because I'm a completer finisher. I like to see stuff out to my cost, I think, sometimes.
We're really curious about what we're like as kids, how that shapes us when we end up as adults. And you've talked a little bit about being that middle child in leaving. How much do you think that shaped where you ended up? And when you were little, what did you want to be?
Well, I'm sure it inevitably shaped me. I'm not sure if I could put my finger on specific things or specific moments that drove me to where I am today. But as a child, I think I would describe myself as an enthusiastic leader. So some of that was good and some of that was bad. so you know, the good was I was captain of the school rugby team. I was captain of the athletics team. I played the lead in lots of school plays. I mean, you know, anything was going on, I would throw myself into it. So I was sort of very enthusiastic leader, maybe slightly misplaced at times, I don't know. But then on the bad, I mean, my mum, if she were here, bless her soul, would say whenever there was any bother going on, I was usually at the centre of it. And not that I ever admitted it, Mike, because I had 2 brothers to blame, particularly my younger brother, who was persecuted. But so I think inevitably those things do shape you, and I see lots of those traits still in myself. I think in terms of what I wanted to be lots of things. It changed every 10 minutes. But early on, I remember wanting to be a policeman, which seems a bit weird now, or a jet pilot. And then I realised I was colourblind, so you couldn't do that when you were colour. I don't know why you have to be able to see colours as a policeman. I can sort of understand as a jet pilot maybe, but anyway, you don't want to press the wrong button, do you? But yeah, so that went out the window, and then I wanted to be an actor. I really wanted to be an actor, and I had sort of dreams of going to drama school and stuff. And this is maybe where my sort of upbringing did affect me, because actually it just seemed such a pipe dream, so unreachable, and we had no idea of how to get into a drama school, even what they were. So that sort of passed me by, really. And so I slightly regret that. But then, as I said earlier, I was drawn towards business. And I remember being in school and talking to a teacher, and she guided me down that path as I was thinking about uni. And that was really influential, obviously, in terms of what I've ended up doing.
You mentioned, we've talked obviously about the 3 big brands that you've worked for. Did you have any awful part-time jobs or anything as a teenager or a student?
Oh, it's so many. I mean, I started work at 12. I don't know if that's even legal. I mean,
I think
I'm not
probably
sure.
not.
What were you doing at 12?
I had 2 paper rounds, at 12. And then I had some really awful jobs. But the thing that jumps out is potato picking. So I don't know if either of you have ever picked potatoes. Oh my word, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I remember you get picked up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's freezing cold. Getting in the back of a smelly old dirty truck to be carted to a field somewhere. And then, I mean, it's quite fascinating. It's sort of partly automated, but mainly down to human endeavour that potatoes come out of the ground. So you're allocated a space. It's called a bit, which is a bit unimaginative, I think. But you have your bit, which is maybe like 4 or 5 meters long. And then the machine comes along to kind of dig up the potatoes. And the machine's called the driller, because all those rows that you see in a field, they're called drills. So the machine comes along, you get down behind it, and then you pick your potatoes frantically from your bit. And then just as you've finished, you think you can get a breather, the machine blooming comes round again. And so I just remember thinking, this is relentless. And it got to like 7 a.m. I felt like I'd done 3 days work. So I didn't last long at that. I didn't last long. But I actually spent most of my teens working in a supermarket.
Right.
I did that for about 4 or 5 years. Presto.
I remember Presto.
Do you remember Presto? The Presto Manifesto? That was their sort of marketing tagline. I did all sorts of jobs there, and some really terrible ones, gutting fish and, I don't know, putting the bins out for the whole day. But the thing I loved the most was catching shoplifters. So I was for a while allocated that job, which in the main I quite enjoyed. It sort of felt like being a spy.
That was your inner policeman coming out again.
Well, maybe it was, but I even that turned a bit nasty, because I remember at one point being punched in the face by a woman as I apprehended her at the bus stop with a whole salmon down her top. Literally a whole salmon. Anyway, she punched me and I just let her go with the salmon. But so that was a grounding moment.
You have to pick your battles.
Yeah, I definitely had my fair share.
I'm curious to know, though, were you an undercover detective or were you actually in the uniform? I don't know why I need to know. I just need to know.
I mean, undercover in the sense that we took our white coats off and went out in our civvies. I mean, that was it, and just skulked around behind the sort of beer aisle or whatever, and just tried to catch people out. But the things that went on, very funny.
Looking for suspicious fish down their tops.
I mean, you'd think if you were going to nick some salmon, you'd go for a small pack, wouldn't you? Not a whole one.
Quite. Maybe she was going to
There's
sell
some
it.
advice for your listeners.
Good advice.
Top tips.
Yeah. Again, looking back, this time to your teenage self, what advice would you give yourself now?
I think I would say not to follow the pack and to trust your intuition and be okay with carving your own path and doing things differently. I would say that's my mantra now, has been for quite a long time. I'm sort of quite happy being that person. In fact, I revel in it, I think. But I'm not sure I knew that then. And I don't know if it held me back, but I would definitely be more likely to accept what I was told back then and maybe just go with what the accepted wisdom was. Whereas now I really don't. I'd be much more likely to challenge it and be prepared to do my own thing. So that would be, I think that would be my advice to myself.
It's tough, isn't it? Because we still see it now. People don't often respond well to a teenager who's challenging, and who is pushing back, even though it's probably perfectly the right thing for them to do. Maybe it's just a time thing. Maybe it's just a thing that you have to learn.
I think life might have changed. I think life's moved on. I look at my kids now. All of my kids have really got strong opinions on the world. and the much talked about millennials and Gen Z and them having opinions on the world, and in particular in climate change. And so, I mean, I see it playing out every day. And my 11-year-old girl, Scarlett, she is 11 going on 21. And I mean, she's got such strong views on everything, which I love. I really sort of encourage it. And she's got into a ruck this week with some teachers, which I think is brilliant, because they wouldn't let them celebrate Pride Month. They'd gone into school with they bought these little kind of rainbow flags on basically on cocktail sticks, right? I mean, it's ridiculous, this story, but and they were handing out the flags to their friends and saying, "Oh, it's Pride Month, we should celebrate." And they were confiscated because they were sharp.
Oh,
So anyway, her and her friend carried on and handed them out and got themselves into detention. I was like, "Go girl, good for you." Some things you got to stand up for. So so I think they are definitely way more opinionated and good on them for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was talking to the CMO of Guild, Michelle Goodall, about she's got teenagers, and she was talking about the Minecraft generation, about the fact that they are not just sort of talking about changing the world, they're doers, they build things, and that they just get on and just fix things and change the world. And I just thought it was such a lovely sort of phrase about being the Minecraft generation.
That's really interesting. I mean, Minecraft is now, I mean, they all play. Actually, even my eldest is at uni, and he's gone back to Minecraft, which I find slightly bizarre. But I caught him and my 16-year-old son playing Minecraft. I was like, "Have you guys gone back to this? You know, it's been years," and they've been drawn back in. So there might be something in that.
I wonder if that's a pandemic thing, because I must admit I've been going back to watching episodes of Friends and things like that, stuff that I watched years ago as a sort of comfort blanket, I think. So.
There might be something.
That's not going to allow you to build anything, is it? Though, watching
No, it's not. Not the Minecraft generation.
That's a waste of a day.
There's 10 years between my two sons, and my youngest is 17, and they game together. Maybe they don't live together. And Minecraft is definitely, it's something that comes back every now and then, and it's just a lovely bonding thing. They might otherwise not have any contact particularly, so I think there's a lot to be said for it. So thinking of the people that you've worked with over the years, which genuine humans have influenced you the most?
There really have been so many. I think it's a very difficult question. I mean, there's been so many people through my career who I would say have been prepared to take a chance with me at times when I've just been slightly perplexed that they've taken a chance with me, but they've seen something and taken a punt. And it goes way back, really. I think back to my Thomson days. There was a guy called Nigel David who was my first proper boss, and he was the first person to promote me, and also the first person to reject me for a promotion. And in both cases, he was spot on. I was absolutely not ready for the second one, but so he was a very clever guy and really got the measure of me, but really backed me in a number of things. And then likewise at Virgin, there was a guy called Mark Furlong who was the first person who promoted me to marketing director, who believed in the vision that I had for the brand. And then at John Lewis, then people are numerous. Andy Street, who was the MD of John Lewis, is now the mayor of the West Midlands, weirdly. He was the person who promoted me to the board. Seems ridiculous now saying it in a way, but it was an unusual appointment. It was he actually created a role. There was no customer director. There was no sense of what that even was, but he was prepared to go with it on the basis that him and I could work it out together. And then a couple of amazing women, Jill Little, who was sort of really ran the business during that time. She was the person who I went to work for, because the person that recruited me left the business. I went to work for her, and I didn't think it was going to be a good match. And actually, she was really the making of me. She gave me the air cover, I would say, to get the brilliant work done that sort of became sort of famous at John Lewis, and because she believed in it. And then that carried on with Paula Nichols, who was my most recent boss. She so often, against her own better judgment, went with my gut, my belief in what was right. So those people I have nothing but admiration and respect and gratitude for. And actually, I've really tried to take that through my own career as leader and make sure that when there are moments where you think someone's 50-50, is you give them the benefit of the doubt and give them the opportunity. And I have to say, it's always paid off. Not once have those people let me down, and I'm very proud of those people and what they've gone on to do. So I think it's definitely a behaviour breeds behaviour thing.
Mm-hmm. I know at the Marketing Society, there's been a big focus on pushing brands to be brave. Would you say that that's been a personal mantra for the brands under your watch as well?
I'm not sure if I could ever claim it was a mantra, but it's definitely something that sort of bubbled along underneath for a long time. I mean, it depends what you mean by brave, I guess, but I can definitely say hand on heart that I've always had lofty ambitions for the brands that I've worked for. And we talked earlier about the belief in the purpose and, you know, what we were setting out to do, and I really believed in those. And so I've just wanted to make sure that the work that we do is the best it can be, and really for me that's about doing the right thing by the customer. Nearly always comes back to that, and that means setting a high bar and being pretty restless and relentless in that restlessness around doing the right thing. And you know, John knows one of the things I was most proud of is the team that I worked most closely with on all of the marketing communications. So we never believed the hype. We enjoyed it and just let it play out, but we never believed the hype. It was always about the next thing. And there is some risk in that, because the risk is that you don't stop to celebrate. But I think as time moved on, we sort of learned to find the balance. But in the main, we were always kind of pushing for more and pushing to do the right thing by the customer, which means being prepared, as we talked earlier, being prepared to stand up and be the lone voice in the room, and you know, sometimes flow against the tide. Many times in the boardroom, I would be a lone voice, and as I said earlier, I sort of quite revelled in that. But not everyone does, so it does take courage, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, something that has just occurred to me that I will probably never get a chance to ask again, but the Christmas campaigns for John Lewis, how far in advance were you planning, and how much pressure was that?
Well, you would typically be planning as soon as we came out of Christmas. So Christmas would be done, you'd be exhausted, and then, I mean, literally the first week in January, we would come together, the John Lewis team and then the sort of various agencies come together in a big old room and just go, right, what do we think of that? And we do a proper review in terms of the data and the analytics and so on, but also just, you know, how do we feel about it? We'd look at everybody else's work across the world and just have a good old day of reflecting. And then that would be the beginning of the process for starting again. And so we got to the point actually we didn't have to brief it anymore, because it was the same brief every year around thoughtful gifting. But you know, the briefing effectively would happen in January, and then we would then be into sort of scripts and ideas sort of February into March, and depending on how well that went, you know, you'd be signing some off around sort of March, April, and then off into production in sort of May, and then through the summer. So that was the kind of rhythm. And then the pressure point. Honestly, I've been asked that question so many times, and it maybe sounds a bit arrogant, but I never felt that pressure, and it's not. That's really not drawn out of arrogance. It's I enjoyed it so much, really enjoyed it, revelled in it, and it felt a privilege to be part of it. It was really special, and that was the overwhelming emotion, and that overcame any sort of pressure or any other the naysayers. There was lots of naysayers in the business and around, and there's always people who will criticise if you put your head above the parapet. On the day that it launches, I mean, you know, it never ceased to amaze me, the sort of reaction that it's had. It's a bit like having a baby and, you know, showing it to people and thinking, God, I really hope it's not ugly. Because I think it's beautiful. But, you know, and, you know, there's a lot of pressure, but then, you know, and it nearly always went well, but inevitably you get some naysayers. So, I mainly just loved it.
Well, I guess, as you said, you had to kind of not believe the hype, but I suppose in a similar way, kind of not take on the criticism as well, because you just drive yourself crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So which brands have been impressing you recently then? You've got, you know, you can have like a holistic view. Which would you say are the ones to watch?
Well, I think digital has, obviously changed the world, but I think when it comes to brands, changed brand behavior and in a good way, I think, because there's an inherent transparency that comes with digital that forces brands to behave in a different way, I think. And those that perhaps haven't grown up with digital are sort of slightly on the back foot. So if I give you a couple of examples, do you know Patch? Patch is a sort of indoor plants, actually outdoor plants now as well, but mainly indoor plants business. If you don't know Patch, then go and look them up. They are quite remarkable business, I think. So at a really small scale, they've managed to take what's a category which is, I think, relatively low interest. I've never been that interested in plants particularly, but they've humanized the whole thing to the point that the plants have names, right? So I'm looking at a plant right in front of me now, which is called Big Ken. I mean, I just loved it. We've got 3 Big Kens in the house. And so each plant's got a human name. And that aside, the copy, the tone of voice, the use of video, they use their staff really prominently in the video. It's just all so human. And when you buy a plant, you get a course in how to be a parent, a plant parent. And it's a sort of program of, like, I think it's 10 emails you get, and each one of them's got real depth about all the different aspects of looking after plants. I never thought I'd find myself saying this, by the way, but now I really care about them, and I just think they are a very human business, and their customer experience scores are incredible. And a similar business is Bloom and Wild.
Oh, yes.
Bloom and Wild, which is in the flower business, sending flowers through the door. And I think they've taken it even further. They're more established, but they in particular have sort of just absolutely nailed the customer experience. They have a team, the customer delight team, and a head of customer delight. I mean, just a great title apart from anything else, but they are renowned for their customer experience, and actually lots of what they've done has gone viral. I don't know if you've seen any of it, but there was an example in Mother's Day earlier this year where a customer was due to receive flowers on Mother's Day, and the head of customer delight was concerned that the flowers were taking a bit longer in the supply chain than they normally would. So the stage they were at was a bit behind where it should be. So in anticipation there might be a problem down the line, they sent another set of flowers.
Wow.
I mean, and so this exchange went on just because she had to tell the customer, like, you're going to get you might get 2 sets of flowers, 1 set's on us. This was an email exchange, and then the customer then posted it in social, and of course it went viral. And it's just a remarkable story, and so the way that they treat their customers is quite remarkable, and they do lots on top. They've got lots of programs in their community all around sort of supporting carers, and they're big on sustainability. Got a really sort of transparent perspective on sustainability, which I think is something that permeates lots of other great brands at the moment. I think it's one of the things that's defining those that are great and those that are struggling, I think. And it's about taking a front foot approach to sustainability, not seeing it as one of the hard things you've got to do in the too difficult pile, but actually seeing it as an opportunity for the brand and commercially as well. And if I think about brands like Patagonia as the obvious one, but there's a brand called Everlane, which is a US retailer, which I don't know if you know them, but they produce high quality wardrobe essentials, I would probably call them. So like a sort of slightly more modern equivalent of the Gap back in the day. But they are all about sustainability and have been since the start. If you click on an Everlane product, you can not only see where the product has come from, the individual product, but you can see the factory. You can see videos of the factory. You can see the staff. You can see the programs they've got in place to support those people in Thailand or Vietnam or wherever it is. And as someone who used to run sourcing and sustainability at John Lewis, I know just how hard this is. I mean, it's incredibly difficult. And so good on them. And they also have something called radical transparency. So you can, any of their prices of their products, they break down into its component parts. So you can see the cost of the goods themselves, the cost of shipping, the cost of their margin. So they're transparent about their margin. It just changes the whole relationship with the customer. And so I think that's the way the world's moving. And actually COVID, one of the great upsides of COVID is I think in general it has made brands more human, more aware of the importance of humanity and how fragile it all is. And there's a sort of a humility that perhaps didn't exist before. So I think I see that as a great upside.
I think that's a trend that we've definitely seen at the social element with, clients and brands that we talk to about that desire to have more of that human connection. What do you think brands can do to be more human?
Well, if I was going to be more human to you, Tamara, it would start with me understanding you, because empathy is drawn out of understanding. And getting beyond, what you see in front of you and really deeply understanding someone. I think it's exactly the same for brands. It starts with deeply understanding your customers. And I think that's so often underlooked. So understanding every part of their lives, how do they feel about the market you're in? How do they feel about you as a brand? What's great and most importantly, what's not great? And really facing right into that. And as I look back at my time at John Lewis, the most pivotal thing that we did was the first ever customer strategy, which was all about this space. It's about deeply understanding attitudinally what was going on with the customer base and how they felt about the brand and the role that John Lewis played in their lives. So I think it all starts there, and then that determines where you put in your discretionary effort on behalf of your customers, because you can't do everything. You have got to prioritize in business in reality. And I think spreading your bets too far means you're going to do nothing well. So I think really focusing your discretionary effort where it really matters is the beginnings of connecting with your customers and it seeming to them that you are doing the right thing by them, and it changes their perceptions, and inevitably makes a stronger connection between the brand and the customer. And I think that's where the secret lies. I mean, the Blue and Wild example is a brilliant example. Another one, more closer to home for me, was Waitrose. So Waitrose have really ramped up their digital operation, and as a consequence of COVID. And when we were doing that, we sort of did lots of research with them and Ocado customers and so on. And they would talk about, lots of things in relation to the service. But the two things that really mattered to them the most were, one, can I trust the person who I'm going to let come over the threshold in my house when I'm stood there in my dressing gown at some god awful hour in the morning? And two, they check the eggs, right? So they check the eggs was the thing. And when I remember being in this research group, and it was it was like a ripple through the room when someone mentioned checking the eggs. Oh yes, they check the eggs. It's brilliant. And it's not really about the eggs per se. There's a sort of practical bit of that. It talks much more about the care that's taken and the humanity of the individuals that they would be bothered to check the eggs. So those moments really matter, I think, and that's what brands need to be thinking about. And beyond that, I think it's about the communication. It all starts there. Your tone of voice, and ensuring that you understand your customers, and that the empathy you feel comes across in your communication to them. And I think that's the thing that I've seen change up for the good in the last year.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. It's funny, the strength of the Waitrose brand for my mother, who had somehow convinced herself that in the height of the pandemic that it was totally fine to go and shop in Waitrose because you wouldn't catch COVID in Waitrose. I think that says a lot about the brand.
That's brilliant. That is brilliant.
So you have worked with some incredible brands, Craig. But what are you personally most proud of in your career so far?
Well, I mean, there's lots of things I could mention. We've touched on a few, but I think the old adage that you are only as good as the people around you is something that I really believe in. It's a cliche for a good reason, and so I think what I'm most proud of is the teams that I've had the privilege of building and leading. And I sort of look at John Lewis. I said earlier that we sort of grew it from a team of 30 marketeers to 600 people from all walks of life and different backgrounds. And so I very proud of what we achieved, and the size of that team was a consequence of us driving a sort of customer transformation. The customer genuinely became central in the business over the course of that time, and that was a testament, I think, to the work we've done, because every time you achieve something, it gives you a mandate to push a bit further. And so it was the consequence of lots of years of work. So partly about what we drove, but in the main about the brilliant, dynamic, diverse, vibrant culture that we created. It's a brilliant place to work. And I think back, I was just reflecting actually a few days ago with some of my old leadership team, and we created something special, and it was great to be there. And that's where the magic happens. That's where great work comes from. So I feel very proud of those teams and what they achieved, but more importantly, how it felt to work there. Beyond that, we've touched on the sort of brand communication stuff at John Lewis. It's obviously something I'm very proud of. It's also a bloody albatross around my neck, and it comes up all the time. But in the main, it's something I'm very, very proud of, and I hope it continues. And not just because of the public reaction and stuff, but because of the huge change we saw in terms of how the brand was perceived, and awareness and consideration, all those things, and effectiveness, return on investment was incredible. So there's some good commercial reasons for being proud of it too.
Yeah. And going back to your teams, I'm intrigued about how would you describe your style of leadership?
Well, this is something I'm pretty well versed in because I'm doing interviews at the moment. So you have to see there's a sort of interview version and then the sort of real version. So hopefully no interviewers are listening. Look, an ex-colleague said to me actually a few weeks ago, someone who worked in the people team at John Lewis, she said to me that she, and I quote, "I always knew what your opinion was, Craig, as you were very clear on that, i.e. you're opinionated. But she also knew that it always came from the heart and with positive intent." And I think the last part of that is so important. When someone's got positive intent, it sort of means almost everything, I think. So I thought it was really nice you said that, and I think it sums me up. I hope I combine sort of straightforwardness and honesty with just, genuine warmth and empathy. I'm a really good listener, and I really care deeply about people, and I know that other people can see that, and so I build great relationships. There's I could count on one hand the people that I've not managed to build a relationship with, and each one of them still slightly burns a hole in the side of my skull because I haven't cracked them. So it doesn't matter who they are, where they're from, the kind of people that I can usually build common ground and build a relationship because I'm a good listener, I think. So I think that probably sums me up.
Are you saying that you don't have a good poker face as well? If that your previous boss could always know what you were thinking?
I'm terrible. I have no poker face. I've never played poker either, so I'm sure I'd be rubbish. But no, I heart on my sleeve. Everything is there to see, good and bad.
So we're going to move on to the part of the podcast where we get a bit more personal now, and it feels like that was a nice segue, actually. So how do you like to spend your downtime? Do you have any guilty pleasures you can share with us?
Well, I've got 4 kids, so as I said earlier, so I don't get an awful lot of downtime. So the reality is most of my time is with them. One of them's 2, so 2-year-olds just take over your whole world. But if I do have some space, I do really enjoy fitness. It's my running, cycling, and I took up yoga during lockdown. Total cliche. In each case, they just give me an escape. They sort of take me away from whatever it is I've got going on. And I think particularly running, it's much mental as it is physical. So I really enjoy fitness. But my big passion is cooking. I absolutely love cooking.
And has that been since before lockdown? That hasn't been a new thing?
Yeah, forever, really. My mum taught me to cook when I was in my teens. I remember sort of cooking and baking with her, and it stuck with me. And it's during lockdown, it just got even more acute. And if you look at my Instagram feed, you'll see just how annoying it is. There's a lot of sourdough on there.
So is that your perfect weekend then? Fitness and cooking?
Yeah, I can think of nothing better than hosting friends. I love it. In fact, I've got friends coming around next Saturday, so like a week on Saturday, and it's just, despite it being that far away, my mind's already going, thinking, oh, I could do that, maybe I could do that, and I'll get all the cookbooks out, research it ridiculously, and then I love buying ingredients and then prepping and hosting and stuff. That's definitely my perfect weekend. And if it wasn't that, I would be in the Alps snowboarding. I love snowboarding, and I haven't been able to do it for 2 years, best part of. So if not here, then I'd be there.
And how brilliant that we can have friends around again. I just hope that feeling of gratitude for that doesn't go away.
Hugging people recently. I've hugged people in a pub recently. Not random people, actual friends. But I would probably hug random people. But it's just been lovely. Like the small things that really matters.
And if you weren't in marketing and communications, what else would you be doing? Maybe a chef?
I would definitely be a chef. No question. It's really clear to me, and I have actually thought about, would I go and retrain, and then the reality of funding 4 kids and all the rest of it kicks in. You're like, probably not. But I really would. I would take great joy in just working with food day in, day out. I think, and it's a very, very hard job. I'm sort of under no illusions, but I would love being a chef, or maybe a pro golfer.
Nice.
I'm from St Andrews originally, so was born there, so it's in the blood a bit. So, and I've got kind of back into golf in the last wee while, which I love. So I've got the life of Riley. So I would love a bit of that.
So it sounds like you're pretty adventurous with snowboarding, etc. What's the most adventurous thing that you've ever done?
When I travelled around the world for a year, and I don't know what happens when you go travelling. You sort of slightly lose the plot and do things you would never normally do. But I in New Zealand especially, and in New Zealand I did not 1 but 2 bungee jumps from a bridge about 100 meters above a river, and it was like 85 meters or something. I did 1 forwards and 1 backwards.
Well, that's just foolish.
I mean, it's foolish, but I actually really loved it. I mean, it was so exhilarating, and not landing from the first time. I went and did it again, but I was intrigued because they said, "Oh, you should do it backwards." I was like, "Oh yeah, I wonder if it will feel different." So yeah, I did that and enjoyed every minute of it.
Tamara and I are both not very good with heights.
Yeah.
I don't know how we'd get on with the bungee jump.
I can see you both cringing.
I remember being at the Grand Canyon and my friends pretty much disowned me because I started shouting at random strangers saying, "Get away from the edge," because I was just so nervous at that point. And I was quite far from the edge, but was convinced I was going to fall off. So yeah, I'm bungee jumping is not quite for me.
So you were metaphorically on the edge, physically nowhere near it.
Yeah. If Tamara and I could gift you an extra hour every single day, what would you do with it?
Well, I would like to think that I would sit quietly
Right.
and perhaps do something that I don't normally do, like read a book. But in all honesty, I'd probably fill it. I'm an extrovert. I take my energy from people, and so it's something that really annoys my partner Emma because I just can't sit quietly, and I'm a notoriously bad book reader. There's a book that I was reading recently, which it took me. I mean, in small stints, mainly on holidays, took me 3 years to read.
Was it War and Peace?
No, it wasn't. It's just a ridiculous Ian McEwan book, but I really enjoyed it. But I had to go every time I went back to it. I then had to effectively reread the whole thing because I'd forgotten so much. So sitting quietly is poor. So I'd like to think if you gave me a free hour, I'd use it for that. But I suspect it would be disrupted by some small person at some point.
Probably. How would your friends describe you? And is that the same as how you'd like them to describe you?
I think they would say I was playful and positive, warm, and driven. So annoyingly competitive, quite opinionated, but with a good heart, I think. What I'd like them to say is that I was insanely rich. But I'm not, and I think that's highly unlikely to happen. But yeah, no, I think that's what I would want them to say.
And this feels like a good point to stop. But before we finish, and it's been so lovely to talk to you, Craig, but is there anything that we haven't asked you that you kind of wish that we had asked you? Or do you want to sort of finish with any closing thoughts?
I think just a closing thought. I think I've really enjoyed this. So it's been fun, and I hope your listeners have had fun listening. But beyond the fun, I think more importantly, I hope they've taken out the fact that being a genuine human isn't just a great name for a podcast, that actually being a genuine human, it is the key, I think, to building great relationships, being successful in your career and being happy in your life.
You've been listening to Genuine Humans, brought to you by The Social Element. If you loved what you heard, remember to subscribe, or you can find out more at www.thesocialelement.agency.